great to see you all here today. I can kind of see everyone, the lights in my face. Thank you for attending our session, Frictionless IT, creating a seamless end-user experience. So, before we get started, let me do some quick introductions. My name's Alex Kozlowski. I'm a product manager based in the UK here in London. And I'll be handing off to Michael a little bit later in the presentation, who'll introduce himself then, and he'll go down a lot more detail on certain areas. So, we have a packed agenda, so let's get started. Do you feel frictionless is a bit of a buzzword? Well, today we're going to cut through a bit of that noise, explore what a seamless end-user experience is, and more importantly, why it's worth investing in. We'll show you how to achieve this with the help of Michael, using the existing Jamf tools that you already know and love. And finally, we'll be posting some resources and additional information if you want to take some of this and build this in your own environments. So, let's jump in. And yes, I apologize, there's going to be quite a few Star Wars references, a bit of a geek, I apologize up front. So let's imagine you've joined your organization day one. You're fortunate enough to be given a Mac, and you open it up, you go through the familiar screens, remote management, and you let it go through, you're creating your account, enable permissions and accepting T's and C's. Maybe you need to enable your biometrics or Touch ID in this case, and you're finally in. And then, as you can start to see, the presence of the dark force, as corny as it sounds, it starts to creep in with constant interruptions and pop-ups and permissions, configurations, etc., which obviously can be quite messy in an enterprise environment. So let me just let this sink in, and maybe this is a bit of an extreme example, but want to try to demonstrate like this is an area that we would like to help with. So what can we do here? Before we go into it, fundamentally, we can categorize a great experience into the following pillars. Essentially, we've got the top tract, which is talking more about effortless onboarding, setup, zero-touch deployments as an example, seamless access to work apps, not necessarily the installing of applications, but ensuring those are protected and blocked for those who are not required. So, and then obviously we just showed the intrusive and bombardment of pop-ups and other dialogues, which are not great. Then we've got the bottom tract, which is more related about finding the right tools for the job, so resources and performance and reliability. So, for example, a graphic designer might need a different setup than a IT office worker. Maybe they need more processing power for graphic rendering, etc. So, finding the right tool for the job, not necessarily on software and security, but also hardware. Then we also have the more touchy topic around security and ensuring that the trade-off of security and end-user experience is balanced. And often it's just making sure that some of these security policies are transparent to end users so they're aware of what to expect or why they cannot do something. And then finally, support and communication is around providing the tools or communication transparency of like what's going on and how can they reach out for help, etc. So hopefully self-explanatory. So this leads into the why. Let's talk about some of the more tangible returns on IT for the business. So this quote from Christina Janzer, who's the head of research and analytics at Slack. You might have heard of Slack, enterprise application. Really encapsulates our core philosophy behind frictionless IT. When you create an environment where technology just works, employees can focus on what really matters. It's not just a nice sentiment, it's a profound truth that underpins our tangible return on IT and prioritizing end-user experiences. So we may joke around in the presentation like we're calling it the Force, going with our Star Wars geeky analogy. So if you think back to the onboarding experience that we just saw, when technology is cumbersome and confusing, constantly interrupting and changing, obviously it distracts people from what they want to do in their day-to-day job, and obviously leads to frustration and general dissatisfaction. So when you get it right, of course, we've talked about those pillars. Technology should fade into the background, becomes an invisible enabler. So maybe a good example is like FileVault. It's enabled, and you don't really think about it after that. So this does lead to how our roles have changed ultimately. Following on the quote that we just heard from Christina, we've seen a fundamental shift in IT. For decades, it's primarily been just getting things up and running, keeping the lights on, so to speak. But it's become a lot more holistic than that now. Some of the key areas that we need to consider in our day jobs is driving business outcomes. So we have our own metrics now. It might be like reducing tickets or ensuring. We might even have direct KPIs for business performance. So that's also around ensuring productivity. So we might have tangible metrics around that. Obviously, evolving technology and threats is a full-time job. Finding out what's the latest trends in the industry, our security vulnerabilities, etc., can be a full-time job and takes a lot of time from us. Building trust. It's very easy to lose trust, but it's very hard to gain trust, as you can imagine. We process a lot more data than we used to, and now there's a mix of corporate data and personal data, and also just even finding the right balance of what data to capture or not to capture, or being focused on privacy. And of course, there's the human element. We need to be more empathetic with our end users and understand like what are they trying to achieve and what do they want to get out of this, helping them remain productive. We cannot always be there, of course, and that's why user empowerment is also very key. So allowing them to do tasks on their own if they wish to do so. It helps them to feel more engaged with our organization, and also allows them to unblock themselves. And then finally, of course, we have to keep the lights running, just like we always had to do. So that is still very much an important area that we need to address. So, as we mentioned, our roles have changed, and shifting beyond this to keeping the lights on, as I said, we've got some tangible categories around the cost of friction. The first is productivity. I've mentioned it quite a few times previously. I wanted to share an interesting stat from the Global Workforce Survey performed actually earlier this year that showed that an average user loses around 5.5 hours per week in insufficient tools. Not all of these may be within our control, but obviously if we gain more insights into where they are losing their effort, we can help them in this area. And obviously you can see how that can quickly accumulate into a significant loss. Profitability, another study performed by Qualtrics in 2023 demonstrated a direct correlation around poorly maintained systems and financial performance, namely profitability. In the study, they estimated around organizations that invested in this area successfully were around 2.5 times more profitable than others that did not prioritize this area. There actually are other research that suggests this could be as high as 3.5 times more. And lastly, as we talked about the human factor, trying to promote a culture and foster satisfaction with users. If we get this right, there's a study according to Forrester has said around 3 times more likely for employees when they feel satisfied and feel productive with their tools, they're more likely to stay and also promote your organization internally. So there is more research if you want to read it out at the end in the resources that we'll be sharing if you would like to read further. And of course, we can talk about it later too if you want in the live lounges. So the evidence is quite compelling. Investing in this area is definitely something we should be considering. So how do we go about this? This is where I would like to introduce, well, I'll allow Michael to introduce himself, should I say, my fellow Jedi Master, to talk through more of the details on how we can achieve this. And you need the clicker, so.
Thanks, Alex. Hi, everyone. As you can probably tell, I'm from a galaxy far, far away, as in Scotland. I think I've had about 3 coffees this morning, so Scottish people are prone to talking quickly. I'm probably going to talk even quicker now. But if I do talk too fast, tell me to slow down. That's absolutely fine. And yeah, we're going to have a look at how we built out a seamless user experience. We saw earlier what bad looked like. maybe not bad, but maybe just not ideal for onboarding users. So how can we look at building this out to create a more seamless experience for all of our users? Now, we're going to do something a little bit different here today. I have my user experience laptop, and as you can probably tell with all the stickers, my IT admin laptop. We're going to do a live demo today, so we're really going to hope that the force is with us. There's going to be lots of Star Wars puns, so apologies in advance. But regardless of how you feel about Episode 1 in Star Wars, we're going to look at the first part of user experience, and we're going to talk about onboarding. Just with a quick show of hands, because I can see some of you, how many people have heard of automated device enrollment? Perfect, great. So for people who don't know, this is a fantastic experience for users where a new laptop can be delivered to them, they can open out of the box, start it up, and they are guided through this onboarding experience. Basically, for IT and organizations, you're making sure that these devices are enrolled into your management software, Jamf Pro, right from the very beginning. So we're going to look at doing this live here. This is not a video. This is me doing it live. So we've got the remote management screen here. We're going to start processing this. Now, if you've ever set up an Apple device before, you'll know that there are lots of setup screens that are there. You'll have like terms and conditions, location services, Touch ID, Face ID, all those kind of things. The great thing from an admin perspective is that we can actually tailor that experience for our users. So over inside of Jamf Pro, if I go into computers and pre-stage enrollments, I can go into my Jamf Nation Live user experience, enrollment, and here we can see all the settings that we've defined for this. So I've got it set up with Apple Business Manager. I've got some supporting telephone numbers and emails if my users do get stuck during the enrollment phase. We've got great things like setting the recovery lock password, and the key thing, which I know a lot of the security people in the room will be conscious of, is whether you allow the MDM profile to be removed or not. So we've got all those great options in there. And those setup screens that we have to set up devices, you're able to go through and skip a lot of these. You can see that I'm keeping location services and terms and conditions in place. Now, what we can also do during automated device enrollment is push out the correct configuration profiles. As you heard in the main keynote room, we've got great new technology like Platform SSO, we've got Network Relay as well. These configuration profiles can be deployed during that enrollment phase. But we also have the option to push out custom packages. So if you want some key applications to be installed right from the very get-go, you're able to deploy them out as well. Now, for a seamless user experience, we wouldn't necessarily recommend pushing out all of your applications that you need for organization and for your work. We know that there's a lot there. But there are ways that we can educate the user around what's happening on their device before they get to their desktop. And this is where we then move back into the user space to talk about Jamf Setup Manager. So Jamf Setup Manager is a great onboarding tool. It was written and designed by a very knowledgeable consulting engineer called Armin. If you want to hear from Armin later, come back to this room later on. He's got a great session later on today. But he made this powerful tool where you're able to actually educate the user around what's happening on their device before they get to the desktop. So this happens before the user space. We're able to see applications that are being installed. We're able to go and get information about this Mac as well. So we can check things like what's the download speed currently, making sure that if things are maybe moving a little bit slower, is there a network issue in place? And you've also got things like, if you hold down Option and click on About This Mac, you get an even more detailed view as well. So if you're an IT admin and you maybe need to just check on the enrollment, you can do that here as well. As is a laptop, nice little shortcut. You can do Command and B and actually get the battery status at the top right-hand corner now. I only found out these shortcuts yesterday from Armin, so this is great. So you're learning basically at the same time that I'm learning as well. But here we can create that customized experience for our users. Now you might think, well, to get something looking this nice, it could maybe take a little bit of time to get up and running. It's actually really easy with Setup Manager. You only need two things: configuration profile and a package. That's all you need. You can see that I've got the Setup Manager package here, and if I go into my configuration profiles, Jamf Nation Live, and Setup Manager, you can go in and actually have a look at how we built this. So this is all built into the Jamf Pro interface. We're able to go through and customize which icon we're wanting, whether we want custom wallpaper, even adding in things like a title. And then from there, we have what we call enrollment actions. So these are the things the little tiles that we saw earlier. essentially that's an enrollment action. And we've got quite a few that you can pick from. You've got options like shell command. You can trigger a policy inside of Jamf Pro. You've got built-in install-o-mator, so another great application tool where you can download the most up-to-date application right from the very get-go. So this is built into Setup Manager. You don't need another package for that, which is great. And you can do things like watch path. So if you've got any apps that are being deployed through Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager, you can have a watch path in place to see when that application has been installed. On Setup Manager that I showed you earlier, on the user experience, we had one for Jamf Trust. That's coming from Apple Business Manager. So you can put a watch path in place for that, which is really helpful. And essentially all that this is doing in the background is just building that plist. Now, don't know about you, but I actually find this very overwhelming. I don't know if anyone agrees with me, but if you build a configuration profile like this, hats off to you, because I really struggle with that. So having a nice GUI interface inside Jamf Pro does make my life a lot easier. I just need to paste in the right links. But with Setup Manager, it really helps with that onboarding experience for the user. There are two paths with Setup Manager. You've got the user-driven one, as we just saw earlier. Or if you wanted to do more of a white glove service, so if you wanted to set up the Mac before it gets to the user, you can also have that. And you've got great customizations like user entry fields, so if you want to put in the user's username or email address, you can actually have that pre-populated before they get the Mac.
Moving outside of the network and back in again, which we thought it was a bug. Of course you do. That
help themselves. So that's a little bit about Setup Manager and how you can set it up. Like I said, configuration profile, and it's just a package.
And that's it, super easy. Now, if we move back into our user enrollment page, you can see I've got my terms and conditions.
You remember from my pre-stage, I had that unticked. And then I also had location services unticked, so I'm just going to make sure I use that, hopefully get the right date and time. Now, in the main keynote, we mentioned about platform SSO. So if you've kept up with WWDC from Apple, you may have heard that there's been some amazing enhancements with platform SSO. And the route that we're going down today is Jamf Connect. Now, I'm not saying that everything that we show you today, you have to stick to this path to create that seamless user experience. You can define your own path. And for platform SSO, keep an eye out for updates that we bring, as well as Apple, about having that as part of your user experience. But for today, my user, we're going to utilize our network credentials.
So this is just essentially an Okta login. So I'm going to log in with my user. I think it's aptly named Justin Time.
Oh, that was a good one. And if I then type in my password, what this is going to do is it's going to create the user account for me. So I'm not having to set up a password separately for the local user account and then do a sync afterwards. I'm essentially creating this local user account based on my identity details. Now with Jamf Connect, you can add in some really nice workflows like multi-factor authentication, whether that's a local one or whether it's online, entirely up to yourself. But what we're also doing here is we're enabling FileVault for that first user as well. So if the device ever restarts, again, it's just their password that they need to use to get access to the device. Now from an admin experience, we can actually build this inside of our Jamf Connect utility. So this is our configuration app. When you download Jamf Connect, you get two applications. You get the application for Jamf Connect itself, for the login page, and then you also get the configuration tool to help build this out. And this is where we can go through and define how we want to configure Jamf Connect. So we can have this set up for assigning different users to be admins or standard users. So we can link them with a directory service at that point. We're enabling things like FileVault for that first user. There's a nice setting inside of Jamf Pro that if you tick it, it means that it won't show the pane where the user has to say, yes, turn on FileVault. You can essentially bypass that part, which is great. So it enables right from the very beginning. And we've got those fallbacks for local authentication and offline MFA. So again, all of this is built in. You can determine what's going to be the best path for your users. I know some organizations rely on multi-factor authentication before getting access to the user account. We also have the offline option as well. So if they're on a plane, they're not connected to a network, they can still do that second layer of authentication before getting access to their Mac. So far, so good. We've gone through a pre-stage, we've deployed out the configuration profiles and packages that we need. We use Setup Manager to educate the user around what's happening on the device, making sure we get those key applications installed right at the get-go. And then from there, we then utilize Jamf Connect to create that first user account and get them up and running. So in our user space now, we're in. And Self-Service Plus is just opened up in the background. This is part of our onboarding. So it's just completed a couple of the tasks like setting the wallpaper and setting the dock. As you can see, we've got that nice yellowy orange tint. So what I'm going to do, because it's a live demo, I'm just going to go in and quickly make this look a little bit prettier. Well, it looks a little bit nicer. And we'll just change a couple of settings in here because we're in the user space. So here we've got Self-Service Plus. If you've been a Jamf customer before, if you tried out Jamf, you might have heard of our previous sort of user space, which is called Self-Service. Self-Service Plus is a new, revamped version of Self-Service. Unlike other models out there where they use the plus sign, there's no subscription for this, you'll be pleased to know. But this essentially is an update to the legacy Self-Service. So inside of here, we've got some great visibility into the account management side of things. We can see which users signed in. We're able to see some of those connect options as well. So we're able to make sure that our passwords in sync, And we've also got access to a new security dashboard as well. We're able to see if our devices are being protected and whether or not we're able to use removable storage. Perfect. So this is a great way, again, to make sure that we're educating users around what's available on their devices and making sure that they have the right tools and the applications at their hands ready to go. So that's kind of episode 1 done. So hopefully you don't feel this is too much of a menace. I got some laughs there, that's good, okay. All right, so we're going to move on to episode 2, which is going to be about security and compliance. Because onboarding is just the first piece. We know that for users to stay proactive and engaged with using their devices, we want to make sure that we give them that ability to do that without compromising organization data. And you may be familiar, or you may know that there's probably a seesaw between user experience and security, and it kind of goes back and forth the whole time. So this is what we're going to have a look at, is how do we create that user experience to make it a little bit easier for them, but also saving you some IT time and not having to raise tickets left, right, and center. So let's jump back into our user space again. And the first thing that we're going to have a look at is remediating and blocking any malicious files. So if I was to go in here, I can see that I've got a secure documents application here, so I'm just going to download this just now. This should hopefully install an application on my desktop. Perfect. And now I want to run this. Now, if you've used Apple devices before, you'll know that there's some security tooling built in already. We've got Gatekeeper, and we've also got X Protect. And what we're doing here with our Jamf security tooling is just layering above that. So if there are any malicious files, then what we can look at doing is remediating against them. So even if I try and run this, what's actually happened in the background here is I've got this notification saying secure documents has been blocked, and that's because it's been identified as malicious or potentially unwanted programs. So our IT has blocked this right away. So this is actually built into our custom threat prevention from the get-go. But as security, you can actually layer additional assets on top of that from a custom perspective. So let's say if there was a particular application you didn't want your users to be able to run or process, again, we can remediate against that. Now you'll notice that my secure documents have disappeared from the desktop. So what we've also done is we've quarantined that file. We've removed it from the users so they don't get access to it. So your forensics teams can then come in and identify what that is. And again, you can build in remediation flows. So from a admin perspective, let's have a look at this inside of our security tooling. If I go to threat prevention, we're able to see when the last lot of threat prevention was released, so literally just yesterday. And if you want to see the change log, we now actually have this available inside of our Jamf Learning Hub. So if you want to see some of the files that we've remediated against or preventing against, you can go through and have a look there. But if you've got a specific process that you're wanting to look at blocking, we can go through custom prevents lists here. And this is where you can actually go in and define the process based on the team ID, the code directory hash, or even the signing ID. And again, you can have this blocked as soon as that process starts. So this is all built into our security tooling. This is essentially our macOS security portal, where you can go and define applications and processes that are allowed and even blocked. Now, maybe the force has been getting to me a little bit more, and maybe I'm being drawn into maybe share some of my secret organization details. And maybe, maybe in some far-off galaxy, they still use removable storage. I don't know if you use it nowadays. But what we can do is inside of here is, if I plug in the external storage, what should happen is I get a notification that says, Jamf Protect external storage devices are not allowed. So this has been blocked by our security tooling. Again, the great part here is that you don't necessarily need to block all removable storage. You can actually have some granular or customization to that. So if we have a look inside of the IT admin side of things, if I go into device controls, I can see that I've got my all staff blocking this. So by default, I could say, well, actually, I want this to block all external storage. So any external storage that gets plugged in is going to be blocked. But I've also got the override option here. So I've got the ability to say, well, actually, encrypted drives or encrypted devices can be allowed on our managed devices. Or if you buy your removable storage from a particular vendor, you can have their vendor ID. Or if you've got serial numbers, then you can upload them through CSV. I'm not expecting you to type in every single serial number. That'd be chaos. But what you can do is upload the serial number of those devices and only allow those external storage devices on your devices. So even though we're blocking across the board, we can have those exceptions in place as well. So again, you can define which path you want to go for this user experience. But here what we're doing is we're protecting the data and educating the user around what's happening on their device. Cool. I can remove my storage now. Otherwise, it'll just probably get a little bit upset. Great. So now let's have a look at when the user goes on to a website. Maybe they're browsing through, they're on the web. I was going to try and throw in a Star Wars pun, like a galaxy somewhere far off, but it wasn't going to work. So let's say, for instance, I go into self-service, and I've got access to some of my bookmarks. And I've got my Jedi Master School link here, which is great. So I've got a quick link to my resources. So I'll just open up that, and then I can start becoming an actual Jedi Master. Oh, actually, it looks like a risk has been identified. So clearly the force has been at work here, the dark force, and they've tried to say, well, actually, we're just trying to trick you here. So this is essentially a phishing site. And I'm being notified as a user, being like, oh, actually, this site that you're trying to access is being blocked because we've seen it as being potentially phishing. So again, protecting the user, educating them around that. Well, let's just say, well, actually, maybe that's kind of annoyed me. I'm now going to hedge my bets on some pod racing. So I'm going to go to a gambling website, and I'm going to hedge my bets there. Again, this has been blocked based on the site classification now, which is our content filtering, and it's based on gambling. So again, we're educating the user around what they can and can't do on organization devices without just saying, you don't have access. So this is, again, tailoring this. And this can be customized as well. So you can put your own title, your own words in there, again, the way that your organization speaks to that. But how does that look like from a Jamf perspective? So inside of our security portal, what I can actually do is have a look at our security threats. So here we've got our threat prevention policy, and this is where we can go in and see the threat categories that we have, that we've defined. So we've got phishing, data leaks, malware network, spam, things like that. And we can see that these are automatically being responded. So essentially, we're blocking them right away. And we can alert the user and the admin as well. That can be through an email, it could be through push notification too. Now, if you're wanting to see, well, actually, this looks great, Michael, but what happens if my user starts doing more fishy stuff? Then what if I want to restrict access to those resources? Well, what you should do is head back into the main room for Rochelle and Philippe's session later on today, where they're going to talk around this in a little bit more detail around those remediation workflows. If a user's doing something sketchy, then let's look at restricting access to them. So again, this can all be built in through our security tooling. Now, when it comes to content filtering, we've made this really easy with all the categories. So here we've actually defined a category that you can then look at blocking or allowing. So it's not just a blanket block. Let's say, for instance, when it comes to gambling, we're blocking everything here. But maybe if I do want to keep up to date with some of the pod racing that's going on a different planet, then here I can select which websites or which categories I want to allow or block. Same things for like social media as well. You can allow certain social media sites or apps, and you can also then look at blocking other ones as well. It's not just a blanket, here's a category, let's block everything. And for even more granularity, you also have the option of being able to add in custom rules. So if you wanted to add in your own set of websites that you either want to block or allow, you can add that in as well. So again, we're making this user experience hopefully as seamless as possible. We're educating them around what's going on with their device and making sure that they're aware that they're not able to get access to things and educating them on that piece. So that's a little bit around the sort of device security and networking. We're going to look at the last part, which is actually accessing those resources. So our next part is going to have a look at maybe I want to install applications and also access resources. So let's say, for instance, I want to install my own browser. I don't want to use Safari. I don't want to use Google Chrome that I saw during Jamf Setup Manager. Let's do Arc. So I'm going to download this onto my desktop or onto the computer. And then once that is downloaded, I'm going to look at installing it. Now, if I'm trying to install an application like this, what do we need to be able to install it? Admin, I heard someone shout. Great. If you thought you were just coming to listen and you weren't expecting a quiz, think again. So yeah, here I've got Arc. I'm going to drag it into applications. The first thing it says is going to say, hey, you need to be an administrator to be able to install this application. Now, if I try to type in my details, which I will do just now, what should hopefully come back and say is, no, you can't do that. You're not an admin. Now, rather than having to raise an IT ticket and say, hey, I want to install this application, and then go through all those processes, what we could do is say, well, actually, what I'd like to do is become an admin to do that. So inside of Self-Service Plus, we have the option here to elevate our admin privileges. So that means I'm a standard user. I can elevate myself to admin. You might be thinking this is a really dangerous thing. It's like saying you've got all the Jedi Master skills now and you're going to use them in the wrong or right way. But ultimately, what we can do here is present options to say, well, why do you want to be a user? Admin, sorry. So here I'm going to select my Jedi Master tasks. Obviously, it would be app installation, but we threw in another Star Wars theme here, so why not? So I'm going to click on continue, and then instantly that's now saying that this is going to expire in 15 minutes. And if I then try install Arc once more, I should only need my password because it's already determined that I'm already an admin. So now if I do my password once more, I'll now be able to install the browser of my choice. So again, without having to go down the route of an IT ticket, I'm able to self-serve myself, make myself an admin. Now, for the IT people, you might be thinking, well, what happens if they utilize those admin privileges for other things? Well, again, with our security tooling, you're able to collect all the logs utilizing telemetry and unified logs to see when they elevate themselves to an admin, and then all the processes that they run after that. So you can actually have that streamed into a SIEM of your choice and have that information in one place, which is great. The pop-up option that we had for selecting, that can be written back into Jamf Pro as an extension attribute. So again, you're able to maybe create a smart group or a report from how many people have elevated themselves and based on what topic. Now, because I've installed this already, I can then look at ending elevation, and that will then just demote me back down to standard user. Now, to configure this inside of Self-Service Plus, we actually still utilize the Jamf Connect configuration tool. So if I show you in here, I can go into my Connect preferences, and we have the temporary user permissions outlined here. So this is where I can choose to allow this option or not. I can select whether that timer is going to be visible to the user and how long that duration lasts for. Also things like how many times do you want to promote yourself during a month period. And then we've also got other options like verify that the user who's in front of the Mac is the right user who's requesting those admin privileges. If I walked away from my Mac and just left it like this, Alex could come in and then he could look at elevating himself to an admin. We don't want that to happen, right? So we can add an extra verification, whether that's through your network identity provider or utilizing some of the great things inside of a Mac, like Touch ID. So you can just use your fingerprint to be able to elevate yourself. So really easy to set up, and those promotion choices we can just outline here as well. So again, if you wanted to build in your own, you can have your own options that are there. So super easy to get up and running with that from an admin perspective. So we've looked at securing the user, making sure that they are not installing the wrong software or malicious files. We've looked at blocking against external storage. And we've also looked at then the piece around elevating yourself to an admin. But now let's say I do actually want to access my organization's like cloud resources. Maybe I utilize a lot of SaaS apps, and I want to be able to access them. So what I can do here is I can go into my bookmarks, and I do actually want to access all my Dropbox files. So what I'll do is I'll fire open Dropbox, and first of all, it comes up saying access is restricted. I need to have Jamf Trust enabled.
So Jamf Trust is what we utilize to be able to secure your traffic into your SaaS apps. And for this, I've said, well, actually, any traffic going to Dropbox, I need to have Jamf Trust enabled. Again, it's not hidden away. I've got a nice little option here to click which says on the Jamf Trust hyperlink, I can click on Always Allow. That's going to open up my Jamf Trust app, and then I'll probably need to sign in one more time with my user. So I'll just do that quickly. Just time. I'm not going to say my password out loud. So, perfect. And then from there, I'm going to get signed in. It says, welcome on board. I'm now all set up, which means if I try to access Dropbox again, I'll then be able to get access to my resources. So again, we're securing that traffic and access to those applications and resources utilizing Jamf Trust. And all that was required was the user to sign in. We signposted them to the right place. So again, they're not getting lost in the maze of a new device and trying to get up and running themselves. Now, from the admin perspective, how do we set this up? Well, back in our security cloud, we can go into our access policies, and this is where we can define our applications and how we want to limit access to them. So I've got Dropbox here. I'll go into Dropbox. I'll go into my security and click on Edit. And here are the three things that I would say are quite important when it comes to managing that access. The first thing is it requires the device to be managed. So unmanaged devices wouldn't be able to get access to the resource. Maybe, for instance, I say the user maybe removes the MDM profile, right? They still won't be able to get access to the resources. It needs to be managed. Then we've got the access requires device risk validation. So that's going back to what I was saying. If they're doing some sketchy behavior, then we can look at restricting access. Like I said, make sure you're in the main room for Rochelle and Philippe's session, because they're going to talk about that a little bit more. And then the last part is requires access or Jamf Trust to be enabled. As you saw, when I tried to access that resource when it was disabled, I wasn't able to get access. As soon as I enabled it, I was able to then get access to Dropbox. So those are some of the key things that I would say. So again, from a user perspective, this is making it really easy to access resources. It's user-friendly with those notifications. Again, they can be tailored to your organization. And all of this is lightweight. You know, it's not going to bog down the processor or the system integrity. All that it's doing is building upon the great platform that's there on our Apple devices. So hopefully you can see that this has hopefully been a relatively seamless user experience. I know I've been jumping between user experience and IT admin. I kind of wanted to show you it from both sides. But I think, you know, if we go back to the quote that Alex had earlier on, when you create an environment where technology just works, employees can focus on what really matters. We're trying to remove those roadblocks from productivity. You know, we want to make sure that users have got access to the applications right from the get-go and make it as educated and seamless as possible. Now, like I said, I've shown you a lot there, and that's not necessarily saying that you have to follow that path. But if you want to find out about the documentation that we had earlier and the sort of the theory and the thought process behind creating that seamless user experience, or if you actually want to see some of the resources that we were utilizing, then you can definitely scan this QR code, or you can go that link. I promise this is not a phishing link. Okay, I promise. Okay, you're not going to get a nasty message. If you don't trust me right now, take a photo and then you can use the link below. But we've got all of our documentation resources there, so if you're wanting to find out more about how we built this out, you know, Setup Manager, Jamf Connect, definitely go and have a look at our resources because they're all there ready for you to use. And we've also got all the slides from today as well. So if you want to go back and revisit this presentation, you can go through and have a look at those slides. But other than that, that's also us done around the seamless user experience.